This is a recording of Supporting Workers with Hearing Loss, a Health and Safety Executive and Royal National Institute for Deaf People webinar initiated by Noise Network Plus and sponsored by GTS Meadow and Grace Specialist Recruitment. It was given on the 29th of January 2026. My name is Rachel van Besouw and I'm a Specialist Inspector at the Health and Safety Executive specialising in noise and vibration. This webinar is structured in 5 parts covering hearing loss, hearing instruments, risk assessment, hearing protection, and ending with RNID resources. I'll be presenting for parts 1 to 4, and then I will hand over to Aaron and Ella from the RNID for part 5. Before I start, I would like to thank everyone who contributed to this webinar by providing material and reviewing the content, including my colleagues Janet Welsh and Helen Swaby-Boag from the HSE, Vicky Watson at the Institute of Sound and Vibration Research, University of Southampton, and Aaron Coles and Ella Woodward from the RNID. The aim of this webinar is to explain the risks to health and safety that are specific to workers with hearing loss and tinnitus, and how reasonable adjustments and control measures can mitigate those risks and where to access support. By the end of this webinar, you will be able to understand the consequences of hearing loss for audibility and speech reception, distinguish between different types of hearing technology, recognise the wider health and safety impacts of hearing loss and tinnitus on the worker, identify and control measures to support workers with hearing loss and tinnitus, and describe RNID's role and services and identify how to use and signpost its resources to support hearing health and inclusion in occupational health practice. Parts 1 to 4 of this webinar will largely focus on the requirements for workers with hearing loss. The term hearing loss is commonly used to describe mild to severe hearing loss, which has developed since birth, often after spoken language has been learned, or someone who is born with hearing loss but is not profoundly deaf. The term hearing loss may cause offence if used when referring to people in the deaf community who were born deaf and believe they haven't lost anything. Deaf communities have their own culture and primarily use sign language. The requirements for workers with hearing loss and who use speech will be different to workers who use sign language as their primary mode of communication. And there will be more on communication support options for workers who use sign language in Part 5. Part 1, Hearing Loss. One in 3 adults in the UK are deaf, have hearing loss or tinnitus. If we just consider those adults of working age, about 9 million have hearing loss in one or both ears. According to a survey by the RNID, over half of workers with hearing loss have worked at some time without disclosing their hearing loss, for fear of losing their job, for fear of being treated unfairly, or because they thought that reasonable adjustments wouldn't be able to be made, and therefore there was no point telling people at work. Many people feel uncomfortable about disclosing their hearing loss. Many people feel uncomfortable about asking their employer for reasonable adjustments. And many employers don't know what reasonable adjustments to make. Hearing loss is a partial or total inability to hear due to reduced sensitivity to sound and/or reduced clarity of sound. Here is a simple visual analogy to explain sensitivity and clarity. On the left is a visual representation of normal hearing. In the middle is the same image illustrating reduced sensitivity, and on the right is an image illustrating reduced clarity. Most people with hearing loss experience a combination of reduced sensitivity and reduced clarity. The main types of hearing loss are conductive, where sound does not reach the inner ear due to problems with the ear canal, eardrum, and/or the middle ear. Sensory neural, due to dysfunction of the inner ear, auditory nerve, or higher centres of the auditory system. And mixed, a combination of the 2 types. A quick recap on the anatomy and physiology of the ear. The ear is divided into 3 regions. The outer ear, comprising the pinna and the ear canal up to the eardrum, which amplifies and colours the sound. The middle ear, the region from the eardrum to the oval window of the cochlea, which ensures the efficient transmission of sound and air to the fluid-filled inner ear. And the inner ear, comprising the cochlear and vestibular system, with the cochlea converting sound vibration into nerve action potentials. Let's consider each of these regions in turn. The outer ear comprises the pinna, ear canal, and eardrum. The shape of the pinna filters incoming sounds, giving cues for sound localization, and the shape of the ear canal emphasizes frequencies important for speech perception. Common causes of conductive loss specific to this region include obstruction or abnormalities of the ear canal and eardrum perforation. The middle ear is the region from the eardrum to the oval window of the cochlea. Sound pressure waves vibrate the eardrum and the 3 ossicles, which are the smallest bones in the human body. These are called the hammer, or the malleus, the anvil, or incus, and the stirrup, or stapes. For context, the stapes bone is about half the length of a grain of rice. The middle ear matches the impedance between the air at the eardrum and the fluid-filled cochlea. Causes of conductive loss that are specific to this region include fluid within the middle ear, abnormalities of the middle ear, and otosclerosis, or abnormal bone growth that can fix the stapes bone in position, affecting the transmission of vibration. The inner ear comprises the cochlea and vestibular system. Vibration of the fluid in the cochlea displaces a membrane within that is covered in hair cells. The tops of these hair cells have bundles of projections called stereocilia. Motion of the hair cell stereocilia results in the transmission of nerve action potentials along the auditory nerve. Causes of sensory neural loss affecting the inner ear include presbycusis, or age-related hearing loss, infection, exposure to chemicals, and noise. Sound sensitivity is measured by obtaining thresholds of hearing using pure tones at various frequencies. The British Society of Audiology use the audiometric descriptors mild, moderate, severe, and profound. These may provide a useful summary, but should not be used as the sole determinant for the provision of hearing support. For example, it's possible to have mild hearing loss and experience more difficulty with speech reception than would be predicted based on thresholds alone. Here I've depicted an audiogram for someone with normal hearing. In other words, their average hearing levels are between -10 and 20 dB. On the audiogram, hearing level is plotted along the vertical axis and frequency along the horizontal axis. The red line with circles indicates the hearing levels for the right ear, and the blue line with crosses shows the hearing level for the left ear. The lower down the plot the hearing levels are, the more hearing loss there is. On this audiogram, I've also plotted a shaded region called the speech banana, which shows the hearing levels and frequencies needed to hear certain speech sounds. If the lines for the left and right ears are above this speech banana area, speech sounds will be audible. The descriptor mild is used for average hearing levels between 21 and 40 dB. With mild loss, an individual may have difficulty understanding soft-spoken speech. Typically, the high-frequency quiet sounds go first, such as the F as in fee and the S as in C, which are on the right side of the speech banana and high up. Individuals with mild loss might also not hear sounds such as rustling leaves, a clock ticking, or a car indicator, and they may be using hearing aids. The descriptor moderate is used for average hearing levels between 41 and 70 dB. With this level of loss, an individual is likely to have difficulty hearing normal conversation and may have difficulty in group settings. With this level of loss, an individual requires the use of hearing aids. The descriptor severe is used for average hearing levels between 71 and 95 dB. Loud speech may be understood at about 1 foot from the ear. The individual may distinguish vowel sounds, but not consonants, and again would require the use of hearing aids. The descriptor profound is used for hearing levels of more than 95 dB. An individual with this level of loss may benefit from a cochlear implant and might not be relying on audition as the primary modality for communication. In general, with hearing loss, many soft sounds will not be heard at all, for example, footsteps. Weaker speech sounds, usually the consonants, may be inaudible, such that an individual might be able to detect speech but not follow what is being said. Sound sources may be difficult to separate, for example, speech in background noise, and sound sources such as a forklift truck proximity alarm may be difficult to localize. The physical, psychological, and social impact of hearing loss affects people in different ways and depends on many factors, including age and onset of deafness. People who develop hearing loss earlier in life are more likely to be better adapted. Rapidity of hearing loss. A sudden onset is likely to be more traumatic than a gradual onset. Whether unilateral or bilateral, in other words, if the hearing loss is affecting one or both ears, and other related problems, for example, if the individual has related tinnitus and balance disorders. Tinnitus is the perception of sound in the absence of an external stimulus. It often occurs with hearing loss and is typically described as a persistent ringing, buzzing, or hissing sound. It can affect sleep and concentration, and it can cause anxiety and depression. Despite there being no cure, most people learn to self-manage, and counselling in cognitive and stress management is available on the NHS from specialist tinnitus clinics. Hearing aid amplification of sounds in the environment can also help mask tinnitus, but be aware that hearing aids are generally not worn 24/7, and tinnitus can be a problem when hearing aids are removed before going to sleep. Tinnitus sufferers can contact Tinnitus UK on their confidential helpline, and they can also contact the RNID for free and confidential information and a tinnitus guide. Part 2, Hearing Instruments. Hearing aids are medical devices that amplify sounds that are inaudible and can improve the intelligibility of speech in noisy backgrounds. They can also provide other functionality, for example, wireless streaming of audio from a phone or loop system. Types of hearing aid include behind the ear, or BTE, receiver in canal, RIC, in the ear, ITE, in the canal, ITC, completely in canal, CIC, and invisible in canal, IIC. In general, hearing aid type and size depends on the severity of the hearing loss. The more severe the hearing loss, the higher the power requirement, the larger the battery size, and consequently the larger the hearing aid. Behind the ear hearing aids are the most common type of hearing aid on the NHS and are typically used for moderate to profound hearing loss. The receiver or loudspeaker is located in the body of the hearing aid, outside the ear canal. Sound is transmitted to the ear canal via the tubing. This type of hearing aid will often have two microphones for better directionality. The body of the hearing aid will house the amplifier and sound processor. It will usually have some form of volume control, a battery compartment or rechargeable battery, and the receiver. Sound generated by the receiver travels through the ear hook and tubing and enters the ear canal via the ear mold. The battery life for these hearing aids depends on the amplification needed and the hearing aid functionality, but it's typically 1 to 2 weeks. Receiver in-canal hearing aids are typically used for mild to severe hearing loss. Unlike the behind-the-ear hearing aid, the receiver or loudspeaker for this type is located in the dome that is inserted into the ear canal. Again, this type of hearing aid will have 1 or 2 microphones at the top of the device. The body of the hearing aid may have a switch or volume control and will house the amplifier and the sound processor. The battery compartment or rechargeable battery is located at the bottom of the device, and the receiver wire also doubles up as the ear hook. Different dome types are available, and these may be open or vented, allowing air and low frequency sound into the ear, or they may be closed so that they seal the ear canal. Invisible in-canal hearing aids are typically used for mild to moderate hearing loss. When the hearing aid is inserted, the receiver is positioned beyond the first bend of the ear canal. These hearing aids often have no wireless functionality due to their very small size and deep position in the ear canal. They will typically have only one microphone, which is at the entrance of the ear canal. They will also have a single cell battery and a removal stalk, but no physical buttons or volume control. The amplifier and sound processor is housed within the device. Again, it may have a vent, allowing air and low frequency sound into the ear. The receiver in the device is shown in this image just above the vent. The battery life for these hearing aids is typically 3 to 5 days. Hearing aids may be described as having an open fit or a closed fit. The ear mold, shell or dome of a closed-fitting hearing aid occludes the ear canal, preventing sounds from leaking out and causing feedback. Open-fitting hearing aids have a vent or an open-style dome to allow transmission of primarily low-frequency sound from outside the ear canal to the inside, which may be preferred if the individual has good residual low-frequency hearing. They also prevent moisture build-up within the ear canal, and they allow leakage of sound from inside the ear canal to the outside to reduce the occlusion effect caused by bone-conducted sound, where the individual perceives the sound of their own voice as being too loud or booming. Open-fit hearing aids rely on signal processing to prevent feedback from occurring. Hearing aid programs and features depend on the technology level and setup. Hearing aids are free on the NHS, but if they are purchased privately, they are typically available in 3 to 5 price and technology levels from economy or essential up to premium. A mid-range hearing aid can cost around £3,500 for a single hearing aid. Typical program options include feedback prevention, music mode, speech enhancement, tinnitus management, and the reduction of wind noise, transient noise, and machine noise. If machine noise reduction is applied, this has the potential for improving speech perception, but it also has the potential for reducing the perception of tool, machine, and plant malfunction. Some of these options may be set by default, and a hearing aid user might not be aware which options they have. Bone conduction hearing devices use vibration to transmit sound to the inner ear via the skull and flanking pathways. The basic components of a bone conduction hearing device are similar to those for a hearing aid, but they use a bone vibrator instead of a receiver. Bone conduction hearing devices are used for individuals with conductive or mixed hearing loss who are unable to wear a hearing aid, have abnormalities in the structure of the outer or middle ear, or have single-sided deafness. Types include the non-surgical type, as shown in this image, where the bone vibrator is held in place by a headband. These may be used for treating temporary conductive loss or to enable an individual to trial bone conduction hearing prior to surgery for a bone conduction implant. The surgical type comes in two forms. Bone-anchored hearing aids transmit vibration to the skull through an abutment screw or through a magnet connection. The external processor contains the vibrator. Bone conduction implants differ in that the vibrator is implanted under the skin in a recess that's drilled into the bone behind the ear. Power and sound information is transmitted from an externally worn processor to the bone vibrator through the skin via wireless induction. The externally worn processor is held in place with a retention magnet. Cochlear implants are used for individuals with severe to profound bilateral sensorineural or mixed hearing loss. Cochlear implants comprise an externally worn processor that communicates with a surgically implanted receiver, stimulator, and electrode array. The electrode array is inserted into the cochlea and stimulates the auditory nerve fibers using pulses of current. In the UK, adults are currently eligible for one cochlear implant funded by the NHS, and children are implanted bilaterally. The cost per implant is about £30,000, covering the device, surgery, and first year of support. The external part of a cochlear implant is called the sound processor, and the internal part is the implant. The external processor is worn like a behind-the-ear hearing aid with one or two microphones positioned on or near the ear hook. The sound processor and power source are housed in a casing that sits behind the pinner. A wire extends from the sound processor to a transmitter coil that's held in position over the implanted receiver coil by a retention magnet. Power and sound information are transmitted from the external processor to the implanted receiver and electrode array via wireless induction. The implant comprises a receiver coil, a stimulator, and an electrode array with up to 22 electrodes. The electrode array is inserted into the cochlea and stimulates the auditory nerve fibers using pulses of current. Access to a hearing health professional depends on the provider, which may be the NHS, private, or over-the-counter. Bone conduction and cochlear implants are typically provided and supported by the NHS. Over-the-counter hearing aids are unlikely to come with in-person support. Where hearing aids come with in-person support, most are fitted in a quiet room without the option to check if the settings are suitable for a work environment. In a recent UK study, workers indicated that it was harder to get an appointment with an NHS audiologist than one employed by a private audiology service. And it was reported that there may be little time and few prompts in an appointment to discuss work-related hearing needs. In a related study, audiologists reported difficulty staying up to date with hearing aid and assistive technology. And it's important to be aware of this as assistive technologies are not available through the NHS. Awareness of the UK government Access to Work support programme by the audiologists and workers in these studies was found to be low. In addition, getting support through the Access to Work programme was reported to take a long time. At present, there is little overlap between occupational health and audiology services in the UK, which can impact aftercare and the use of assistive technologies in the workplace. Ways of working together, including data sharing, are needed to ensure that the workplace needs of employees with hearing loss are considered during their audiology appointments, particularly during hearing device fitting. Assistive devices are currently not funded by the NHS, but UK workers may qualify for an Access to Work grant to cover some or all of the cost of assistive devices and communication support in a workplace on top of any reasonable adjustments made by the employer. Remote transmission systems are assistive devices that can be used to make speech clearer in environments where there is a lot of background noise, reverberation, or where the talker is not in close proximity. These comprise a remote microphone, a transmission system, and the hearing device receiver. The microphone can be a dedicated clip-on or tabletop microphone, or a smartphone microphone. Types of transmission system include radio frequency communication, Bluetooth or FM, infrared, and the magnetic output of an induction loop. The Roger-on device is a popular remote transmission system with several microphone modes. These include table mode, which works well for people seated around a table. This mode can be controlled with an app, allowing the user to zoom in on individual talkers. Pointing mode allows the user to focus on the person they want to hear while suppressing background noise and conversation. In presenter mode, the presenter can wear the microphone and it will pick up their voice clearly. And in headset mode, this can be used for video conference and telephone calls. Table microphones can work very effectively in conference or workshop settings. However, table microphones are sensitive to sounds transmitted through the table, for example, sounds of keyboards tapping, and also the rustling and shuffling noises from people opening bags. Because the microphones are so sensitive, the noise levels can be overwhelming, and it then becomes impossible to follow conversations. The benefits of table microphones are therefore reliant on having everyone committed to certain behaviours whilst the microphones are in use. Bluetooth-enabled hearing devices can be paired with most smartphones and tablets to allow audio streaming via an app or the operating system. For example, made for iPhone MFI hearing devices can be paired directly with iPhones and iPads to use the inbuilt Live Listen accessibility feature, which turns the iPhone or iPad into a remote microphone. Note that few invisible in-canal type hearing aids have remote transmission system functionality due to their small size and deep position in the ear canal. Most remote transmission systems are not intended for use in hazardous noise environments where the noise levels transmitted by the remote microphone could be damaging. Part 3, Risk Assessment. Needs and risks are interrelated. An unmet need can lead to someone being put at risk. For example, failing to provide reasonable adjustments can increase the risk of work-related stress. Workplace needs and risk assessments should be proactive, continuous processes. They should be undertaken for new employees with hearing loss, existing employees with newly diagnosed hearing loss, and following significant changes to an employee's hearing or their hearing devices. Employers must make reasonable adjustments to ensure that workers with hearing loss are not substantially disadvantaged when doing their jobs. There is no legal requirement to carry out separate risk assessments specific to workers with hearing loss, but existing risk assessments should be reviewed to cover any risk to them. A risk assessment is a tool for identifying and managing health and safety risks. The management of health and safety at work regulations requires employers to identify what could cause injury or illness, the hazards, and decide how likely it is that someone could be harmed and how seriously, the risk, and take action to eliminate the hazard, or if this isn't possible, to control the risk. Risk assessment templates are available from HSE's website. This slide illustrates part of a risk assessment that could be generic or specifically for workers with hearing loss. What you may notice about this excerpt is that most risk control measures will benefit everyone. For example, sending meeting agendas in advance, having microphones on mute when not in use, ensuring good lighting, regular breaks, and using barriers to segregate pedestrians and vehicles. A workplace or health adjustment passport is a confidential document owned by the employee that records the adjustments formally agreed between the employee and their line manager. This means that if the employee's line manager changes, they can show their new manager what has been agreed without having to go through the process all over again. The adjustment passport can be used to apply for support from the Access to Work programme. Templates can be downloaded from gov.uk, ACAS, trade unions and charities including the RNID. Stress and fatigue due to increased listening effort are well-documented health impacts of hearing loss. The proportion of workers reporting sick leave due to stress-related complaints such as fatigue, strain and burnout is statistically significantly higher for workers with hearing loss than for workers with normal hearing. Stress and fatigue are made worse by adverse listening conditions, and they can also be made worse by increased sound sensitivity. This is called hyperacusis, and by tinnitus. Reasonable adjustments include quiet spaces to rest and recover, flexible breaks, structuring activities to avoid back-to-back meetings, live captioning during virtual meetings, lip reading and/or communication skills training, and techniques for managing stress. Now, it is known that work-related accident risk increases with decreasing hearing ability, particularly in high-noise environments. One study investigating hearing loss and work-related injuries found that for each decibel of hearing loss, a significant increase in the risk of injury occurs. HSE guidance document L108 advises, in general, hearing aid users working in noisy environments should continue to use their hearing aids to maintain hearing ability and minimize safety risks. It also advises that hearing aid wearers should be provided with and make full and proper use of hearing protection. Hazards where there may be an increase in risk due to reduced hearing ability include unfamiliarity with new sites, not receiving safety briefings or instructions due to adverse listening conditions, being unable to hear or localize workplace transport, inaudible fire alarms and warning signals, being unable to detect a change in the sound of equipment that could alert the user to a fault. In some workplaces, there may be a requirement to remove hearing devices for health, safety, or security reasons. For example, hearing devices may need to be removed where there is a requirement for dual hearing protection, where the workplace has security restrictions on the use of electronic equipment, where hearing devices could become an ignition source, or where the hearing device could initiate detonators. Where there is a requirement to remove hearing devices, workers should have access to a clean environment for hygienic removal and a means to store their devices safely. Hearing devices are metal detectable and can be worn under a hairnet at food production sites, provided they're compatible with the hearing protection requirements. There's more on this in part 4. If you have situations where reduced audibility introduces safety risks, measures for mitigating these risks might include using assistive devices or work phones as dedicated wireless microphones to transmit speech via Bluetooth to hearing aids, using speech to text to aid communication, lip reading and/or communication skills training for individuals with hearing loss, deaf and hearing loss awareness training for colleagues of individuals with hearing loss, structuring activities to avoid having to communicate in high noise areas, using visual or tactile alerting devices for alarms, agreeing an alternative means of communication using visual or hand signals, and using level-dependent sound restoration hearing protection. For workers in high-hazard environments, it is important to note that NHS hearing aid catalogue does not include ATEX-certified devices for use in potentially explosive atmospheres, and there are very few ATEX-certified hearing aids available privately. Where workers with hearing aids could encounter hazardous areas containing flammable gases, vapours or combustible dusts, the risk of the hearing aid becoming an ignition source should be assessed. International Electrotechnical Commission Technical Specification PD-IEC-TS 60079-48 can assist in understanding the potential for ignition from portable or personal equipment, PEP, including hearing aids. Low-powered hearing aids may be considered PEP 1C, suitable for use in ATEX zones 2 or 22, or PEP 1B, suitable for use in ATEX zones 1, 2, 21 or 22, depending on their power source, terminals and construction. High-powered hearing devices such as cochlear implants should not be used in these areas without detailed assessment. In addition to potentially explosive atmospheres, where employees with hearing devices could encounter electrically initiated explosives, the risk of the initiation by the hearing device also needs to be assessed. Hearing devices with Bluetooth functionality that cannot be switched off must not be used in the vicinity of explosives that could be triggered by emissions from transmitters. There is evidence indicating that workplace noise exposures for some hearing aid users may need to be lower than the action values in the Control of Noise at Work Regulations 2005. Hearing aid manufacturers currently provide no specific guidance to indicate what occupational noise exposure levels would be damaging for hearing aid users. Furthermore, there is currently no method available for assessing the levels of noise that workers are exposed to when wearing their hearing aids that takes into account the hearing aid amplification. Occupational health professionals and audiologists must therefore be especially vigilant for changes in the audiogram for these workers. This brings me nicely on to surveillance audiometry. Health surveillance is currently required for workers with pre-existing hearing loss, where the unamplified noise exposures are at or above the lower exposure action value. Damage due to hearing aid over-amplification may not present in the same way as noise-induced hearing loss would in an audiogram. Hearing threshold levels at all test frequencies should be carefully reviewed for any deterioration. Referral will be necessary if the hearing loss is unstable or if the worker's hearing loss, tinnitus, dizziness or hearing aid use is causing difficulty or discomfort. Referral will also be necessary for those cases where air conduction audiometry with masking is required for measuring thresholds. For example, for workers with asymmetric hearing loss of 40 dB or more at any test frequency. Part 4, Hearing Protection. In general, hearing aids are not hearing protectors. Very few hearing devices are also certified as hearing protection. None of those available through the NHS are certified as hearing protection. In addition, some hearing devices will not physically fit underneath a hearing protector. For example, bone conduction hearing devices, which are positioned above the mastoid bone behind the ear, won't fit under most earmuffs. Sound restoration level dependent hearing protection may be preferred instead of or in combination with a hearing device. Hearing protectors must first and foremost provide the required level of protection. Selection should then take into account user comfort and preference, compatibility with any hearing device worn, and any particular requirements arising from medical advice. Now, I said at the top of this slide that very few hearing devices are also certified as hearing protection. At the time of recording, Hörlechs in hearing aids in Germany and AirPods Pro 3 are exceptions. AirPods Pro 3 are an example of an over-the-counter hearing aid that has also been certified as hearing protection. One of the issues with selecting compatible hearing protection is hearing aid feedback. Feedback occurs when a hearing aid is brought into close proximity with a reflective surface, such as an ear cup of an earmuff. Sound leaking from the output of the hearing aid due to the vent or a loose fit is reflected by the ear cup back to the hearing aid input. Feedback is more likely to occur for ear cups of a shallow design containing non-absorptive materials. It is also more likely to occur for open fit hearing aids. Fortunately, most modern hearing aids have excellent feedback cancellation, and this issue is becoming less of a problem. Earmuffs with large ear cups can fit over some hearing aids. Cushion shape, cup depth, and material acoustic absorbency can all affect compatibility. In addition to hearing aid feedback, other compatibility issues include the physical act of donning or doffing earmuffs, which can dislodge, change the settings of, and damage hearing aids. Some earmuffs cannot fit over behind the ear hearing aids without breaking the seal. Earmuffs can cause intermittent hearing aid feedback with head movement. The earmuff cushions can interfere with hearing aid switches. The earmuff cushions can also rub against the hearing aid, causing noise that is picked up by the hearing aid microphone. And if the earmuff has electronic functionality, pressure applied to the hearing aid and the pinner from pushing buttons on the ear cup can cause pain. Hearing protectors with no electronic functionality are called passive devices. The attenuation provided by passive hearing protectors is typically greater at higher frequencies, and the effects of hearing loss are typically worse at higher frequencies. This high-frequency hearing loss in combination with high-frequency attenuation by passive earmuffs can make warning signals and speech communication inaudible or difficult to localize. Sound restoration level dependent protectors are electronic protectors designed for intermittent noise environments and reproduce sounds in the environment at a lower level under the protector. They allow the user to benefit from a high level of protection whilst maintaining awareness of alarms and warnings, workplace transport, and the ability to communicate. They reduce the burden of having to repeatedly don and doff hearing protection when working in intermittent noise or when moving between hearing protection zones. The benefits tend to be limited in continuous noise environments if the speech and the noise are reproduced by the protectors equally. This type of hearing protector can improve situational awareness and communication if using hearing aids is not possible or permitted, or when used in combination with hearing aids. If worn together with hearing aids, the potential for over-amplification depends on the hearing aid prescription, hearing aid noise reduction and volume settings, the level of the ambient noise, the earmuff attenuation, and the earmuff volume setting. Maximum is typically between 82 and 85 dBA. It is important to be aware that electronic hearing protectors often have multiple functionality, some of which may not be limited. For example, the 3M Peltor Protect 3 sound restoration level dependent hearing protector reproduces sounds in the environment that is at a limited level. But it also allows the user to plug in external audio that is not limited in the same way. This is important information to capture in the risk assessment and in the information, instruction and training provided to employees. Incidentally, sound restoration level dependent earplugs, such as those shown on the left of this slide, could improve situational awareness and communication for people with mild to moderate hearing loss if using hearing aids with earmuffs is not possible. These may be preferred under hairnets or in combination with other PPE. In the UK, there is currently no standardised assessment method for hearing protector selection, but a pragmatic low-tech approach, such as a crib sheet of questions on comfort, usability, fit and function, can provide sufficient information to make an informed choice. Hearing Protector Guidance Standard BSEN 458 and HSE Guidance Document L108 recommend in situ listening tests to verify the audibility of warning signals and alarms. This is especially important for workers with hearing loss. Safety helmets and glasses can also introduce compatibility issues, particularly for implant users where the helmet harness or glasses sidearms put pressure on the implant. Always check the hearing aid or implant manufacturer information. They will often have guidance on their websites. Also take advantage of try before you buy to explore different sizes and brands. Do ask PPE manufacturers if they have hearing aid and hearing implant suitable products. Some will have solutions already. In general, helmet mounted glasses, visors and glasses with thin sidearms are more likely to be compatible than safety glasses with thick sidearms. And helmet liners, sweatbands or bandanas can be used to improve helmet comfort for implant users. And they're also good at keeping processors and magnets in place while donning or doffing the helmet. This slide illustrates an example challenge accepted by one PPE manufacturer to create a helmet solution for a worker with a cochlear implant. The solution involved fitting additional protection inside the helmet to make the helmet harness compatible with the cochlear implant external sound processor. The manufacturer has made this solution available to other customers who need similar adjustments. Finally, workers should be supported in finding a comfortable, practical PPE solution that, where possible, is compatible with their hearing devices. The Chartered Institute of Building has a handy online directory of suppliers who provide inclusive PPE at ppethatfits.com. Inclusive PPE Standard BS 30417 states that workers should have the opportunity to test inclusive PPE under realistic conditions and suggests consultation might involve occupational health professionals, safety experts and suppliers of inclusive PPE to gather diverse perspectives and expertise. In this slide, I have suggested that audiologists be part of this consultation too. These next two slides contain the references for parts 1 to 4 of this webinar, and you can browse these in your own time. The contents of parts 1 to 4 of this webinar include material subject to Crown copyright. You can view the license information using the web address given here. Part 5, RNID resources.
Welcome to part 5 of this webinar. It's lovely to be chatting to you. My name is Ella and I'm RNID's Audiology Advisor. Joining me is Aaron, our Business Inclusion Manager. We are RNID, the Royal National Institute for Deaf People. RNID are the national charity supporting the more than 18 million people in the UK who are deaf, have hearing loss or tinnitus. We'll refer to these people as our communities throughout this session. Our mission is that together we will end the discrimination faced by our communities, help people hear better now, and fund world-class research to restore hearing and silence tinnitus. We've been helping our communities for more than 100 years, from successfully lobbying after the war for the NHS to provide free hearing aids, to getting hearing screening for newborns in the turn of the century. We've changed the lives of millions through our research and campaigning, and we have no intention of stopping. We have 4 key areas of work: inclusion, health, employment, and biomedical research. We want to see a society in which our communities have equal access to information, spaces, products, and services. It's crucial that everyone has good hearing health and that everyone in our communities achieve high standards of general health. We want to support employers to make sure our communities obtain, retain, and thrive in employment on an equal basis to others. Our biomedical research team fund and carry out research to ensure there are a wide range of treatments to prevent hearing loss, improve hearing, and silence tinnitus. So let's dive into why hearing health matters by first appreciating how many people are affected and what hearing loss actually means for those living with it. The reach of our work is huge. Almost all of us will be affected by hearing loss or tinnitus, either ourselves or a loved one, as it's 1 in 3 of us in the UK who are deaf have hearing loss or tinnitus. Of the more than 18 million, around 2.4 million have a level of hearing loss that means they struggle to hear most conversational speech. We know that deaf people and people with hearing loss are less likely to be employed. This affects 9 million adults of working age. And estimates suggest there are at least 25,000 people who use British Sign Language as their main language, but there's likely more. As you now know, following parts 1 to 4, these are the terms that are used to reference the results of a person's hearing test. Remember that while the hearing test measures the quietest sounds we can hear, it doesn't measure the functional impact of hearing loss or how well someone hears speech in background noise. The way hearing loss impacts someone varies hugely person to person. Someone may have a clinically mild hearing loss but report significant difficulty communicating day to day. Factors affecting functional impact of hearing loss can include environment, cognition, language barriers, and how clearly the people around them speak. It's important to remember these terms can be helpful when managing hearing loss clinically, but they don't necessarily tell us what that person's experience is. It's very important to ask that person how their hearing loss affects them. I'll now pass over to Aaron.
Thanks, Ella. Now let's consider the workplace and what challenges that might bring and what may help. Often, when it comes to hearing loss, the individual may present a challenge that's probably been going on for a long time. The issue might be around using the telephone, for example, and not being able to follow conversation clearly. Calls might take longer to clarify what has been said, or their manager might be concerned why calls are taking longer, which could lead to performance reviews. Whilst it's important to address the immediate issue, this is often the tip of the iceberg, so probing further is key. Be prepared. You might be the first person they have spoken to about their hearing loss at any length, so it's important to listen, dig a little deeper, and be mindful it could be emotional. Here's just some of the barriers our communities face in the workplace. It may be that a person could benefit from hearing aids but haven't yet taken the first steps. There may be a lack of deaf awareness amongst colleagues and line managers, leading to non-inclusive culture. They might have hearing aids that are not compatible with the technology used at work, or they may not hear critical alerts such as the fire alarm or audible announcements. Knowing where to get support such as access to work, occupational health, or reasonable adjustments. Environmental challenges such as poor acoustics, background noise, poor lighting can hugely impact most people's communication, especially for those who rely on visual cues such as lip reading. This could also lead to listening fatigue. If individuals are not supported throughout their career, it could lead to limited career progression and early retirement. These are just a few of the barriers our communities face. Here are some of the ways employers can help to support overcome the barriers. Share RNID's free hearing check and spread it across the organisation to start the conversation. More about this later. Educate colleagues in deaf awareness. Ask people their preferred method of communication and, most importantly, make it happen. Have clear processes and policies about where to get support when needed, and bring teams together to resolve tech issues swiftly. Remember, reasonable adjustments are there to support people to do their job just like anyone else. This is Jack, one of RNID's storytellers. He works at HSBC and has lived with hearing loss his whole life. This is what deaf awareness in his workplace means to him. I'll just pause for a moment while you read. Simple changes to attitude and behaviours can make a huge difference to the workplace experience of someone with hearing loss. If you or someone you know has lived experience and would like to share your story, our stories team would be delighted to hear from you. The most important thing you can do to support someone with hearing loss is to ask about their communication preferences and make it happen. Show people that you are willing to support their communication needs, because it does matter. It matters to them and it should matter to us all. Here we'll touch on just some of the information RNID provides. The readily available free resources you can access and share, the impact we have on our communities, and what you can do to get involved and champion inclusion. At RNID, we bring together a wealth of information from subject matter experts across employment, health, inclusion, policy, technology, audiology, service design, and research. And we also work with an extended lived experience research panel. Here's the RNID website. We have a huge amount of trusted expert health information, advice for those who would like to support us through volunteering or fundraising, and find out about our exciting biomedical research, news, and much more. To the left, you'll see the live chat function, and on the right, you'll see the hands icon, which provides BSL interpretation of our website content. Our content is an enabler for action and helps people to start the conversation about hearing loss at work, understand what employees might find helpful, how to go about sourcing and booking communication support, such as BSL interpreters, identify technology for the workplace, and where to go to get further information and support. Over to Ella.
Every year there is a National Tinnitus Week. This year it was on the 2nd to the 6th of February. So this year we've revised and updated our tinnitus guide. So the guide is a key source of information and support for people with tinnitus. It helps people to understand what tinnitus is and the possible causes, which can help to reduce fear and uncertainty around tinnitus. And really importantly, it has practical tips for managing tinnitus, including relaxation and wellbeing practices. It also has information for how to support a loved one with tinnitus and updates from our biomedical research team. Please do check it out. It's now live on our website. Also have a look at our social media channels, where we have a really powerful series of videos co-produced with people with lived experience of tinnitus. As well as providing health information, we've got several online services and tools that can be used by anyone. We have many lines of open communication with our communities. We invite queries of all types, and we have a dedicated contact team to answer them alongside our subject matter experts. We're really proud to be contactable through email, phone, live chat, BSL video call, text, Relay UK, and post. We've also got a free online hearing check. This is for anyone aged 18 or over to check for signs of hearing loss. After taking the test, they'll find out if they need to see someone about their hearing and get our advice on what to do next. This includes a letter that could be taken to the GP to support the need for discussion and/or referral for diagnostic testing. Over 700,000 people have taken the test, and I'd really encourage you now to just pause the webinar, scan the QR code with your phone and give the test a go either now or in a short while. Another one of our great free resources is our personalised digital communication card. This is for people with lived experience to inform others about their communication preferences. People can create and tailor the card exactly as they wish, informing others about their lived experience and what would work best for them. The card is a great visual reminder that colleagues can use how they choose, so they might like to embed it into their email signature, show a visual on their mobile phone, or print and laminate it wearing it on a lanyard, whatever works for that individual. As well as our comprehensive online information, we also provide in-person support. We work on the ground to support our communities by running free drop-in hearing support sessions called RNID Near You at nearly 200 venues across the UK. We provide in-person hearing checks, we support those with NHS hearing aids with aftercare and maintenance, and we also provide information and support for those with hearing loss and tinnitus. Our services are run by volunteers, many of whom are deaf or have hearing loss or tinnitus themselves. Back to you, Erin.
Next, we'll share a few examples of how we help workplaces become more inclusive and deaf aware, and some of the ways we also work with organisations. In January 2026, we launched Make Your Workplace Inclusive, providing organisations with a suite of free resources to share with their colleagues. Our It Does Matter research found that a quarter of deaf people have experienced negative attitudes and behaviour from colleagues at work, which almost doubles the British Sign Language BSL users. By using our simple tools and tips at your workplace, you can help change this. What you'll receive when you sign up is free posters and videos to help teams feel more confident communicating with people who are deaf or have hearing loss, easy to use resources which can make a real difference, and tips to share in Deaf Awareness Week or at any time. Deaf Awareness Week is from the 4th of the 10th this year in May. So why not sign up to our resources, which you can do so now or as you wish. Deaf awareness training is not a nice to have. It is key to improve inclusion for our communities who face barriers every day. It should not be presented to support a specific person or the responsibility of colleagues with lived experience to educate others. With barriers faced every day, this can leave people feeling frustrated, isolated, excluded, and can affect their confidence in communicating with others. We are working in partnership with Signature, the UK's leading awarding body for deaf communication and language qualifications, to provide 3 e-learning courses: recruiting, managing and supporting deaf staff, deaf awareness, and BSL for beginners. As 1 in 3 adults are affected, training to all employees helps create an inclusive culture and working environment for everyone. We're really thrilled to be working with HSBC. Since October 2024, we've been raising awareness of hearing loss and looking how best to support HSBC colleagues. So far, 75 colleagues are members of Here Together. This brings together colleagues with lived experience as well as people who are passionate about the topic to provide an open platform that champions inclusivity and deaf culture. We've also supported the implementation of a bespoke e-learning course, Understanding Hearing Loss, with simulations which replicate the HSBC office and branch environments. Over 4,000 colleagues have completed this award-winning course so far. Over 1,600 colleagues have completed RNID's hearing check, opening up the conversation around hearing loss and hearing-related topics. We're also delighted to be working with BT to improve experience of customers with lived experience during the digital voice switchover. We've joined BT's Customer Experience Roundtable to represent the needs of our communities. We've reviewed BT's customer communications to make sure they're inclusive. We've tested commonly used assistive technology with the new digital phone lines, and we've conducted customer trials to better understand real-life experiences. And lastly, we've launched a communication campaign to reach our communities. If your organisation is interested in improving inclusion for your colleagues or customers, drop us a line. We have a dedicated team to work with our partners of any size. Here's RNID's contact form, a great example of the various ways that our communities may wish to contact us or you. By providing multiple options such as phone, email, online forms, we accommodate different preferences and needs, making it more accessible for individuals with diverse communication styles or requirements. This approach not only increases the likelihood of connecting with a wider audience, but also represents best practice in customer service. Organisations can look to this model as an example, as it promotes inclusivity, enhances accessibility, and improves overall satisfaction by giving people the flexibility to choose how they engage with you. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the session and found it helpful and insightful. It's great to see such a warm response, and thank you. Thank you.